What is going on YouTube? Chrono here and welcome back to another PSO2 video. In today's video, we're going to be going over all of the augments that we have to apply to all of that precious new gear that we've gotten since the Stia update. And let's just say we have quite a bit of content to cover, so let's jump into it. Quick note before we jump into this video actually. Last video I was actually editing, I noticed I was pretty breathy. There was a lot of involved in the entire video itself, so I'm going to do my best to try to keep those out of move my mic a good amount further away from my face, because editing that out is not easy to do. Just understand that I heard it too. It was just as irritating to me. Let me know in the comments if you guys notice any sizable difference, but enough of the tangent. Let's go ahead and jump into these augments. I'm actually pretty excited to talk about these. So the Stia region's actually looking pretty dope with the augments we've got. Some are a bit more expensive than others, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but realistically, we have a lot of different choices. So let's kick things off with our brand new souls. We've got the Freed Soul, the Dolar Soul, and the Neil Soul. These are basically the souls from the boss fights that we've got in the new Stia region. All these souls are actually pretty solid. Because of the changes with the units, the fact that it's minus 10% down resistance, which basically is just minus 10% resistance across the board. Essentially, you have minus of all of your elemental resistances go down by 10%. That's not that bad, all things considered. Basically, if you were to use 4 of these souls, 1 on each of your armor and 1 on your weapon, that's about equal to 1 of our previous units. And the trade-off is you get the 3% potency, which is really, really nice, assuming you're going for 4, which realistically in all these situations, we're looking at the highest tier of each of these augments, paired with 15 HP and 5 PP. So basically, you're getting every stat you want. In previous regions, we had to choose. In Alio, you had PP, in Redum, you had HP, and in Kavaris, you pretty much just lost out. I guess I should be a bit more specific when I say lost out. Essentially, you had more PP in Alio, you had more HP in Kavaris, and then you would trade having a little less of both of those for having both of them together. This time, you get maxed of all of those things, and all you have to do is trade off some down resistance, which realistically, we have plenty to spare, seeing as how our units have changed. All in all, I love the new souls. My biggest complaint and gripe is the only place we can get a hold of the melee soul, which is going to be a consistent thing that's happened multiple regions. Actually, the only region where this didn't happen was the one region and it didn't matter, which was Redum. But we've had multiple regions now where the melee soul has no urgent quest tied to it. The reason this matters is because urgent quests are the one thing that the most of the community does, and getting a free set of this soul every time you complete the urgent quest means the prices are not very high. At the moment, the only place to get the melee soul is going to be from one of the vets over in the plant, and kind of sucks because not everyone's going to be farming that vet, and it's RNG. There's no guaranteed drop. This means melee souls are upwards of 2 to 300k a piece, while all the other ones are as low as 10 to 5. That being said, we can actually work around that, and we're going to talk about that in other videos, but all in all, solid souls. I'm actually pretty happy with them. The next set of augments are a little boring, but we're going to talk about the stat augments. They're good. They're easier to get in the new region. The 4s are not super expensive anymore because everyone can get a hold of them, and they're good choices as a placeholder augment. No downside, only upside. Definitely awesome. Now moving on a bit quicker onto something a bit more interesting is the dual stat augments. Now in a previous video I mentioned that these augments are more or less kind of useless, and I still kind of agree with that, with a caveat. The place for these augments realistically are placeholder slots. Now, they are pretty heavy. They're up to 2.75%, meaning they are still behind like the better augment slot when you're going for that 3% golden spot. But it's going to be a better choice than throwing something else in, like say 1.5% potency or 1.5% potency plus 1.5% potency floor. That 2.75% is pretty good. All things considered, not a completely useless augment considering how easily it drops, meaning its price is definitely in a good spot. But I can't really rank these things over, let's say, a placeholder for something else you're going to be wanting to get. And if we want to talk about triple is still only 2%, meaning it's not very good. So I still kind of leave that one alone. It's like one of those freebie augments you just kind of get. It kind of sucks being a triple stat augment and not being very strong, but that's kind of the trade-off right now for having to augment hybrid. And for all of you guys out there that didn't believe me on how augmenting hybrid is kind of painful, keep in mind that in the Stia region, SEGA released a stat that made it so you no longer have to augment hybrid. Because realistically, augmenting hybrid just hurt your potency, and it really wasn't fair for hybrid players and hybrid classes to have to augment hybrid in that sort of situation. From an optimization standpoint, the place for these augments are going to be if you've quite literally just want to play multiple classes and don't want to have to set up multiple sets of gear. But keep in mind, if you're going for that level of optimization, you are playing at a disadvantage. That has nothing to do with your skill, that is just gear. And as we know, PSO2 at a higher level is mostly going to be a game of skill, not gear. Gear will only get you so far, but skill will carry you much, much further. Moving on, next we've got Alt's Secreta. Now, Alt Secreta has always been kind of like a toss-up of do I want to use it versus not wanting to use it. Secreta is going to hook us up with 2.5% potency as well as 2.5% potency floor. It's one of the few places we're actually going to get potency floor in our augment setups. I say that, but then thinking back, 3 out of 5 of our augments in BIS are going to have potency floor, so axe that. Either way, our only trade-off is going to be 10 HP and 1.5% damage resistance. That might seem like quite a bit, especially when you're putting it on 4 individual pieces of gear. However, we have so much extra defense to kind of work with this time around, plus add-on skills, it's not really as bad as it looks. Next up, we've got our Gigas Augments. These are fantastic. They're basically just giving us some extra free HP along with the potency we've already got, so definitely like that these can be fit in along with all of the other augments that we've got that are basically kind of giving us a little bit of negatives. 3% potency, and then that solid 20 HP. Not a lot to say about these, they just earned their slot. Next up, we have the exploits. We're only going to talk about fire and ice exploit as these only pop up on 2 new weapons. The prim and the effulgent weapons drop, well, I guess the prim comes with the 2nd level of ice exploit, and the effulgent weapons drop with the 2nd level of fire exploit. Seeing as these only come attached to the weapons that they actually are useful for, and those weapons aren't really that useful currently, they don't really have a place. But possibly in future setups, they could make some pretty good use cases for a couple of niche runs. Reminding me back in Alio where I used ice exploit on all of my gear and my weapon while we were doing purple runs. Moving on, we have the king of the wallet destroyers. We've got Mastery. So as it stands, it's still just Mastery 4, thank God. I'm not sure if that's going to be changing up anytime soon, but Mastery 4 gives us a solid 2.5% potency, 2.5% potency floor, as well as 2.5% damage resistance. Much like Gigas Augment, it's nice to see that damage resistance come through without having to really sacrifice much for it. It's a nice little bonus. It's not why we choose it for an augmentation, but it's nice that it's there. Moving on, we have a bit of a divisive augment, the Dreadkeeper augment. Like at the beginning of almost every region, Dreadkeeper is the topic of conversation. People talk about how we have this thing with potency floor and how useful Dreadkeeper can be, especially with its whopping 50 HP that it provides you on top of 10 PP and 6% potency floor. It's hard to think that that's not going to be an amazing augment to have. And while it's not bad, it's still not better. Now, there's an argument to be made that 6% potency floor is totally worth it. Truth be told, when you look at the calculation of how much that potency floor is worth, it's about 3.4% potency, which the astute amongst you might have realized that is technically more than Gigas Augment. So the question comes in, why wouldn't it be the better choice? Well, the answer is crit. Crit now exists, and we are critting pretty often. The fact is we all have access to add-on skills, and crit is starting to show up on a lot more weapons potentials. And the moment you crit, your potency floor is completely pointless. I'm going to give a crash course on potency floor really quick for those of you guys who may not understand how this works. Feel free to skip ahead. However, it is important to mention in case I'm going to be making this sort of argument to begin with. So the way that damage works with weapons in PSO2 is there's a variance. There's a variance between 50 to 100% for the weapons we're currently using. 7 and 8 star weapons have a pretty high variance. And the way that works out is essentially whenever you roll damage, as long as you don't crit, your damage is rolled between that 50 to 100%, either being 50% of the damage you dealt with all the way up towards 100%. That roll, of course, being RNG, which is why you don't see, just one set of damage numbers and then a second set of numbers whenever you crit. Now, the way that potency floor works is it raises the low end of that damage variance. Let's say, for example, you have a fairly BIS augment setup. You're looking at a potency floor of about 67%, meaning that as long as you don't crit, your damage roll is going to be anywhere between 67% of your damage to 100% of your damage. Now, the reason that crit matters in this situation is because whenever you do crit, your variance is thrown out the window. You do 100% of your damage regardless. Then, of course, you add on any extra crit damage you might have, whether it be fixes, and of course the 20% that you get from critting in the first place. So not only is it 100% of your damage, but you're also getting extra damage on top of that. And that extra damage is being multiplied against what your potency currently is, meaning that raising your potency floor in those situations is doing you absolutely zero favors. Now, that's not to say that raising your potency floor is completely a trap, but you do want to raise them about equally. You don't want to sacrifice potency for potency floor. And as crit becomes more common, potency floor is going to matter less and less. I personally believe we'll never really end up in a situation where potency floor is going to be completely useless. However, it is going to be a situation where we need to keep an eye on how much potency floor we're gaining versus how much potency we're gaining. So all that being said, where do I put Dreadkeeper? You can look at Dreadkeeper as something you can substitute in for Gigas stat. And I'd even argue for at least having one Dreadkeeper in the mix, right? Because it does also still give you 50 HP and 10 PP. And while that 50 HP doesn't mean a whole lot for most classes, that 10 PP is pretty large. So I'd say if you're going to use it, maybe slot it into one piece of gear. Anything more than that might be just a little too much. And I'm sure there are many people that are thinking, well, the 50 HP, the damage resistance, all of those things definitely should put it higher on the list, right? The reality is that with add-on skills and the way classes are built right now, well, yes, it is helpful. They're not really necessary. Like maybe back when we were using no add-on skills, back when Belgrin was the play all the time, this would have a lot more value. But now we've got damage resistance built in add-on skills, extra HP built in add-on skills. We have PP built into add-on skills. We have armor now that doesn't have minus, elemental resistances. All of these things mean that that extra value isn't as valuable. However, if you're someone who values high levels of defense, if this is like, I want to be tanky, this is the go-to tanky augment, like 110% that you're getting offense and defense out of. So if that's your play, then by all means go for it. Actually, I would say if you're someone who I want to build tank at NGS, granted you don't really need to build that, but maybe that's something that you want to do. I would say get this augment on everything that you have. Don't drop Gigas for this. Drop maybe alt Secreta for it instead. Again, not really worth it from a damage perspective. However, if that's what you're going for, this is a high value defensive augment. And I probably lost some of you guys with that whole defensive augment conversation. But either way, I figured it's not worth it to ignore that sort of thing because some people do like to play that way. And if I can help some of my defensive tanky boys, still be offensive, then I'm all for it. Just, don't sub Hunter. All right, enough of that tangent. Next up, we've got the Stera Notes. So like every other notes of every previous region, not really something to do with these notes outside of just go ahead and stack them up and hold on to them. We have a theory of what we're going to be using these notes for in the future, and that hasn't come to fruition yet, so just hang on to them. And we also have the Dexta Note. I mean, it's not bad. It's potency plus HP with all down resistance. If you're going to look for a potency augment, not a terrible choice, but again, not really what it's here for. On to the next divisive augment that pops up every single region, the Domino. Stira Domino is a whopping 3% potency with all down resistance minus 2%. The only real place for this augment is in a full triple potency augment setup. And we talked about how those really aren't all that optimal to begin with. I kind of toss this into the same category as the notes. Essentially, I have a theory, or we all have a theory, that this is going to be used for a later augment setup. So just hold on to it for now, unless you're someone who just plays everything and you really need to have an augment set up for everything, then this is a pretty good choice for that. And that's really everything that was worth talking about. I say that was worth talking about because that's not every single augment in the game, but realistically, these are the ones you're going to interact with the most. So I've been talking about it all video, this BIS augment setup, and I'm sure some of you guys are curious, what is the augment setup? So, disclaimer, first off, this is all based on math, calculations, and understand that math can't account for every single situation. There will be certain cases where other augment sets are going to be better for you overall, depending upon your overall skill level and use cases. This augment setup is just going to get you the maximum amount of damage on average. And that setup is going to be Soul 4, Mastery 4, Alt Secreta 4, Gigas Stat 4, and Addy, either Def Meltech, Raw Meltech, whatever one you happen to be able to get a hold of, but essentially the newer Addy capsule that is the dual stat that also has potency floor on it. Now, keep in mind, this will be on the new Gigas armors. That gives us a grand total of 95.4% potency. And now you're probably thinking to yourself, Chrono, but I saw on Twitter there was someone that had 103% potency. This is obviously worse, right? Because they had higher potency. But no, you can just forego potency floor for more potency. However, your average damage is going to be lower. If you're curious about how that works, you remember that conversation we had about potency floor? Well, if you skipped it, go back and watch it. This is basically favoring both together. You're favoring potency plus potency floor. And at the end of the Kavaris region, we actually completely went potency floor for the most part. We were mostly all in on potency, and whatever potency floor we got as a part of it is totally fine. I believe we were like at 62% potency floor. Right now we're at 67% potency floor, 67.9, so 68%, so it is higher overall. So this does bring our average damage up. However, it is worth saying that if you happen to just be going for crit runs or god luck runs and you're a speedrunner or whatever it happens to be, if you go with full potency investment, yes, you can get over 100% potency. However, at the time, myself and quite a few others in the community that are working on these actual averages find this to be the best choice overall. It's basically kind of the middle ground between potency floor and potency. Basically, you're not losing out on much potency to make sure you're still gaining on potency floor. But if you wanted to push just potency, you'd basically be dropping out of the Mastery 4 and out of the Alt Secreta 4 in favor of 3% augments. That would look something like Stat 4, Soul 4, I believe Stira Domino, Gigas Stat 4, and then of course your Addy Capsule. Of course, the Addy Capsule doesn't really matter as long as it has at least 3% potency. And that's about it, guys. Shoutouts to the friend Kai Stara. If you guys don't know who that is, Kai is a fellow PSO2 content creator and streamer who was super cool and went out and set up his entire gear set. I basically just bothered him on Discord and was like, hey man, I want to get some good footage or some screenshots for people to take a look at in the video. And he went and augmented all of his gear. Granted, he planned on doing this, but he didn't have to do this for the video. So again, thank you so much for getting that taken care of for me. You'll find his socials either linked in a pinned comment or in the video description, so definitely go check him out. He streams over on Twitch and is an amazing soaring blade user, so absolutely check them out. Toss him a follow. Super chill dude. Also, we can't forget about Nep, resident JetBoots user and friend of the channel, who actually took the time out to talk with me about what augments are actually useful and which ones aren't going to be that amazing. You can check out their socials, also linked in the video description, again, possibly in that pinned comment. I haven't said how I want to do that format just yet, if that's not obvious to you guys. They are a wealth of knowledge and an amazing JetBoots player, so you should definitely check them out as well. I do believe Nep streams, but they do post on YouTube, so I'll have both of those links for you guys. And that's about it. Thanks again to everyone who watched the video all the way to the end. I know this is quite a bit of information. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Though I don't always answer every comment, I do read them all, so I appreciate you guys taking the time out of the day. Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to keep up with more, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Peace out.